like a fountain in my. I got love like the ocean. I got love like the ocean. I got love like the ocean. I got love like the ocean in my soul. I got love like the ocean. I got love like the ocean. Love like the ocean in my soul. I got love like the ocean in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I got joy like a fountain. I got love like the ocean in my soul. What is it? We sang that one a while ago. Short while. Yes. Well, not an arrangement, but the way we know it. Steal away. Steal away. That's in the hymn, right? Oh, no, but Myers used to sing that. What a Monix. See. You know Steal away? Steal away. To Jesus. Steal away. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay. My God calls me. He calls me from the thunder. The trumpet sounds within all my soul. I ain't got long to stay. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay. Green trees are bending. The trumpet sounds within my soul. Ain't got long to stay. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. Ain't got long to stay. Other Wallace, are you ready? 305. You want to sing 305 to open? Is that lively enough for you? That good enough for you, Ella? I'm gonna see that at the welcome table. I'm gonna see that at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna see that at the welcome table. See that at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna feast on milk and honey. Gonna feast on milk and honey. I'm gonna feast on milk and honey one of these days. wear a long white robe. I'm gonna wear a long white robe one of these days. I'm gonna wear a long white robe. Wear a long white robe. Swing up, honey. Sit at the welcome table one of these. I'm gonna sing and never get tired. I'm gonna sing and never get tired. I'm gonna sing and never get tired one of these days. I'm gonna sing and never get tired. Sing and never get tired. Wear a long white robe. Feast on milk and feast on milk and honey. Sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna shout out hallelujah. I'm gonna shout out hallelujah one of these. I'm gonna shout out hallelujah. Shout out hallelujah. With my long white robe. Sing and I get tired. Where on them gun, honey. Sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna see my loving Savior. I'm gonna see my loving Savior. I'm gonna see my loving Savior one of these days. Gonna see my loving Savior. See my loving Savior. Shout out hallelujah. Where? Sing and never get. Sing some milk and honey. Sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hey, I'm gonna walk on streets. I'm gonna walk on streets of gold one of these days. I'm gonna walk on streets of gold. Walk on streets of gold. Woo! Huh? 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 Huh, feast? Milk. Sit at the welcome table one of these days. That was one of my favorite growing up in church doing it. Why? Oh, we love that song. All right, so these songs we're going to do our opening hymn, 305. Give me Jesus, and that should be over everything. Let's all stand to do this together. In the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. Just about the break of day, just about the break of day. Give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You may have all this world. Give me Jesus. Oh, come to die. Oh, when I come to die. Oh, when I come to die. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You may have all this world. Jesus. We'll bow our heads and ask Elder Sarah to open us in prayer, please. Amen. Thank you, and we may be seated. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Almost like good morning, Vietnam. I'm in a good mood today. I'm in a very good mood today. For those of you who missed the presentation this morning, you missed a lot. I have already spoken to one of my brothers. He's an elder for the young people in a church in Orlando, and he's going to pull it down and present it to the AY leaders so they could show to the young people. I went home and my wife's church was good today because she watched it on YouTube. And I mean, who could doubt it? If you look at a lot of presentations, sometimes you see people and their presentation is tight, but you could still see little holes in there. I'm telling you, tight. The circular way, and it ended up with redemption. It started with despair. If you remember, even the 13th Amendment that was supposed to guarantee the freedom of the slaves had a big old clause in there that says, you're not a slave except you do this and you're going back to be a slave, and we're going to set all traps for you. If you're out after 8, if you cannot prove your work, we're going to send you back to jail, which was, slavery, which was jail. But it ended with redemption. Ended with redemption. That's always a good place to end. Always a good place to end. I want us to ask Courtney anything that we want to ask her this afternoon. You could even ask her, when is she getting married? Okay? Anything. You know, we love Courtney just as much as she loves us, and she doesn't forget about us, and neither do we. So we could ask her anything, but, you know, we have young people here who are on their way up. On their way up. And you may look at other guys, or girls who have made it, who, 30 years older than you, and maybe you think, that was a different time. Well, here's a young lady who is almost your age, just not even a full generation removed from you. So feel free to ask her all the questions that you need to ask her. Let's bear in mind this one thing. As black folks, wherever you meet a black folk, we all are one. I want us to hear that. Because Selassie's speech, that's basically what it was saying until, the until, I'm losing it right now. Until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is totally and permanently discredited and abandoned, all we got is war. Racism, as we know it, was really started in the United States. It was a marketing, an economic thing to bring slaves to the Caribbean, the US, South America. But once they got the people here, they realized, I cannot treat a human being that way unless I make him a non-human being. How do I make him a non-human being? Because remember in 1620, 1625, here in this country, there were Irishmen who were indentured servants. They were, in fact, almost as slaves. There were Italians. There were other races, the Polacks, who were here as indentured servants. But they looked like us. So we can't really tell them they're less than us. Oh, but that melanin in their skin, we could use that as a differentiator to let them know that they're less than us. So that's why we all are the same, because they all think about us as the same. When we put those demarcations, you're from St. Lucia, you're from here, you're from that, that's just geography. That's just geography. We all are the same. And they look at us as the same. But we all need to move up. Our young people, this is a great opportunity for you to learn how people move up. So we're going to bring in Courtney. Ask her everything. Ask her when is she getting married.
Hi, church. Truly, this is discussion, conversation, question and answer. I have no remarks or anything written, so questions. Well, okay, so maybe we can start with something I didn't mention this morning, but something that kind of ties in with what we discussed this morning, and that is pardons, court pardons, and record sealing. So for my pro bono work, that is the work that we do for free, I guess, that the firm does for free. I have focused largely on reentry. And so reentry is what they describe as after prison, how do we want people to reenter society? And so we talked this morning about some of the consequences that people face. So like housing issues that can lead to people being homeless, employment issues that can lead to people being jobless. And part of what we know is when people have been in our criminal system and they come out and they struggle with housing or especially employment, they are more likely to commit another crime and end up back in the system, right? So, and they call that recidivism. And if you don't want recidivism, what you need to do is help people. First, it would be great if they didn't have a record that followed them in a way that caused them to not have employment or housing, or we can help them make an income, we can help them find housing, we can help them avoid those things that many times causes people to steal, right, again, or right now we're doing a project around trespassing. So a lot of people end up sleeping where they shouldn't because they have nowhere to sleep, right, and can be charged with trespassing. So that those kinds of things don't happen. Part of what we try to do is help with housing, help with employment, those kind of things. And largely, some states have laws now where after a certain period of time, you can get your conviction overturned. And so that would be like a pardon or record sealing. So, there are criteria. So the one that I'm working under says that it has to have been 10 years since your last conviction. So you couldn't have committed a crime in the last 10 years. And this 10-year period is not counting any time you spent in prison. So it has to have been 10 years since your last conviction and your last day incarcerated or on probation or any of those things, right? So all of that has to be done. There has to have been 10 years and you have 2 or fewer felony convictions. So if you have 3, you're not eligible. So 10 years, and there's 2 or fewer criteria. And then you apply, and the court system will decide whether you are able to prove that you should have your record sealed. And there are certain crimes that don't count. So many times if you have a violent crime, so if your conviction is for a violent crime, you won't get your record sealed. In Connecticut, while in law school, when I did it, I went to a hearing, and it's sticky because the court wants you to show both how you have been harmed by your criminal record and how you have overcome your criminal record. So you have to strike this balance between showing I struggled so much because of this thing, right? Yet still, I am a productive member of society. And that's really hard to do. Like, is it that I couldn't find a job? Or is it that despite this thing, I found a job? And they will say, well, you've been working for 20 years. You're fine. Like, obviously, this thing isn't really affecting your life. Why do you need this pardon, right? So you need to both show that you are harmed by it and show that though you are harmed by it, you've been good and productive. And that is a difficult ask. But if we're looking for ways to support people who have criminal records or who have been a part of the system, that kind of reentry work, supporting pardons, right? Supporting record sealing. When we vote, when we choose our legislatures, thinking about people who support, right, these kinds of measures, that's one way we can be of support, just in our position as people who can vote or people who can influence the system, vote for people who support these measures. Yeah. Any questions? Yes. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Wow. Mm. Mm. Yeah.
thing about it is this. You would think that in a country like this, we didn't have the resources to help these type of people. The way how they deal with it is to take them and send them back
Yeah.
down there, you know, where resources is non-existent, especially in smaller places.
And part of that is our prison system is about punishment, as maybe it should be, right? Like maybe, depending on your views of punishment, maybe you commit a crime and we believe that there is punishment, right? But not rehabilitation, right? So if our system was more about rehabilitation while punishing or while saying you should spend 2 years away from society, 5 years away from society, but during that time, we will rehabilitate you, then you get people coming out, right, who are not worse than they were when they went in, right? You get people coming out who might be better than they were when they went in. But that's not what we have, right? We have a system where people go in and they are abused and harmed very often, and they come out. And even things like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I went to a talk and they were talking about what it costs to call home when you're in prison. So prisoners might work, if they get paid at all, for like 40 cents an hour or something crazy, and they put that on their account. And to call out, you know, you have these collect calls if your family can get the charge, can cover that charge, or you can pull from the account, right? Your account that you've worked for to call. And the price of calling, it was astronomical, the price per minute to call your family, right? So even people who want to stay connected to their communities by calling home aren't able to do so, or may not be able to do so. So even if we take away the abuse and the getting beat up and all of these things and solitary confinement, also we have people disconnected from home and family and community and not able to afford to call home. And so we are destroying humans. And it's not 2 people, right? Our prison population is above 2 million. So we're destroying more than 2 million people. Yeah. And yeah, sometimes we deport them back to wherever and call that a consequence. Yeah. Melissa?
Just wondering about real life situations that have happened, in the 2000s, one that week. So my question is two-part. In light of the fact that in reality, where we think we are in real life, what kind of programs or teachings should take place from your perspective for young black children or young black teenagers so that they can be prepared for the world out there? Because I don't think that we see that. Like if we were born in the 60s or 70s, we would see that around us, right?
Yeah.
But we don't. What we see now is a more subtle level of the same thing still happening,
Right.
but it's more subtle. Like we talked about this morning, it's more kind of more undercover.
And it's systematic rather than legal. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so they don't see that every day.
Yeah.
So what kind of training should be in place for them or programs for them from that standpoint? And then the second question is, how do you feel about unconditional support for a black person by a black person just because they're black?
Okay. That's tough. So your first question, I want to take from the perspective of West Indians and West Indian immigrants. Because sometimes I think it's easy for us to separate ourselves from these Americans, right? From black Americans. Because we're convinced that we're different. And in some ways, we have different influence. We have seen different things. In some ways, our mindset might be different, so we approach the world differently. But it's very true that in the next generation, our children, much of the harms of African American 6th generation children, right? So even if you yourself have this immigrant advantage, let's call it, your children and grandchildren definitely don't have.
There's not an immigrant. We think
Right.
that there's an immigrant.
It's in
There is not.
it's in our heads.
When we drive down the street, they
We
see a
look
black
exactly.
person.
Yeah.
When you go to work, they see a black person. So I think that we think that there is one, and we think that all day. But when you,
We're the same.
All the same?
Yes. And so I think it begins with those conversations, right? Like, we can be clear that in the United States, we should stop making these broad distinctions between us and Black Americans. And when we talk about the way that Black Americans behave, when we talk about the way that they dress, when we talk about them in the workplace, right? That's all of us attempting to differentiate ourselves, make ourselves better. And that's not much different from what white people very often do when they talk about Black people, right? Like as a blanket. And yes. And so first, I would say it's recognizing with our children that although we may have this cultural difference, right? You may have this cultural background that is different. You're not different, right? And you are no better than, and no one's better than you either. Like, let's be clear, right? You are no better than these people just by virtue of your cultural difference. And then I struggle with, because I think, especially after Trayvon Martin, we can go into this mode of training our children to live in fear. And that I also understand, right? This inclination of like, you know, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, no hoodies. I get it, right? We want our children to live. But what is that, right? Like, what does it mean to raise your children living in fear? Although I understand it. And I'm not sure on what the balance is between I want you to be aware of your world, but I still want you to have dignity in your world. But I think thinking through that and having those conversations is maybe how we get there. I don't know it yet, I haven't seen it yet, and we want to live. I believe in survival, right? But what is life with no dignity? I'm also not sure. So yeah, I think discussing that balance, exposing them to these like very real stories, because what we can also do is become privileged to where our children now think that was my grandparents' story, that was my parents' story, right? And so knowledge and information about these very real links between history and today also. And what age do you start that? I don't know. People with children, I don't know. Tell me when they start being able to understand these things. I don't know, right? But I think discussion and exposure is important. Okay.
In the last 5 to 10 years, what has emerged is the concept of the school inclusion program.
Yeah.
That, in fact, what we are involved with right now is an attempt to stem that. And basically what it is the extremely harsh treatment or punishment that is meted out in schools to Black and brown kids. Expulsion, suspension, and the principal tend to call the police in pretty quickly
Yeah.
for those kids. And so the question is, within the broader legal framework, how can parents become so involved to be able to protect their children from this heavy policing that we see in school? A lot of it, which is interesting, is triggered up because the law is clear that it's the principal who can call
Yeah.
the police into it. And therefore, what can a parent do to mitigate that kind of relationship between the police and the school, and between the principal and the school?
And is it? Uh-huh.
And you mentioned suspension and expulsion. But even if you are a good student, there are also things like that are like related to criticism, where it's like you have, and I heard one of the celebrities talking about this, how you have the bells ringing, so like you know you're supposed to go to this place at this time, and you're supposed to listen to this person.
It's like they're training you for, yeah.
I also want to add that even if you're a good student and you don't get suspended or you don't get expelled, then you still experience those type of circumstances.
Yeah. I think to your question, Uncle, is where mobilization and movements. So we've moved away, I think. Well, so Black Lives Matter is a movement, right? A newer movement that we haven't seen a movement like it in quite a while. And movements are important. So because part of what answers your question is who is on your school board, right? Who elects your principals?
Yes.
Who is running your school district and your school system? And then we know that our school systems are run by the state, right? It's not federal government, it's very state run. who is in your state legislature? So first we start with who do we vote in at the top, but also who's on your school board? And many of those positions are elected, and you as a parent have a say in who is on your school board. And should we be on school boards, right? Like, should we be getting involved? And if not, should you be mobilizing behind someone in a large way? I mean, like in a movement way, getting parents together, getting voting people together to vote for a certain person on your school board. You should know who's on your school board. And then, using that influence, help to decide who gets to become principal, right, in the schools where your children go. And we don't do that. Most of us have no idea who's on our school board. And like knowing when the meetings are, all of that, right? But that, like, those are big, real questions and aspects of our lives that we should be, like, it's civic involvement, right? And education of our children is like a big question that, like, we should know what's happening at the top. Yes, you send your kids to school and they're teachers, but like you say, like, principals make a big difference, school policy, school boards make a big difference, and we do have some influence on that, and we should use it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bring them back. Right. Yeah. Yeah. 7,000. And they go to school. Yeah. And rebuild our village, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Still can't find them. Yeah, and then what they're exposed to, right? Yeah, I read a poem, and I don't remember it exactly, but it was by a student in Baltimore, and it was called Because I Didn't Have a Pencil, and he writes about how he got up, he got his sister ready for school, he got her breakfast, he got himself ready for school, had cereal, or, you know, did all these things because they had no lights on, so he did this in the dark, all of these things, and he got to class, and the teacher fussed at him, all because he didn't have a pencil. And like that is a very real experience. We're not living it, right? But that's a very real experience for many children. Yeah.
Well, you hit it on the head when you talked about school boards, going to school boards meeting. Because I used to always go to Fort Bend ISD school board meeting, and I realized it was just me, some white folks, and Indians.
Yeah.
Okay? Son was in Midland High School. Fast forward this to 2015. You have Riverstone Sugarland, maybe the most expensive community in Sugarland, which quite possibly could mean around the Houston area. 85% Indians. Fort Bend ISD decided we're going to have this elementary school service Riverstone.
Yeah.
The Indians said no. No, we want the new school.
Yeah.
Guess what they got?
New school.
So when we do not speak up, when we do not let our presence know, and that's why, you know, I don't think we should tell our kids, just tell the police, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. You know, when slavery ended, they spoke to the slave, you know, and they say, hey, why are you still on the plantation? He said, I don't know nothing about this freedom stuff. All I know is my master is a good man. Well, we could stay as slaves in our mind for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, we need to empower our kids, and they need to see us walking as powerful people, and you know, and they will follow. Because I'm telling you, Fort Bend ISD right now, that school board is packed with Indians because we were not there.
And we have Willa Ridge, right,
Yeah,
across the street.
Yeah,
And Willa Ridge
power-
had this mold problem, like, what, 3 years ago,
3 years
maybe?
ago,
And
yes.
like kids couldn't go to school. And because of the location of this church, Willa Ridge is our home high school, right? Like, go Eagles. Melissa is a Willa Ridge alum, right? That's our school next door. Do we know what happened with this mold problem? Do we know what is happening at Willa? And that same time, they wanted to close down Willa Ridge and Krista McAuliffe, where I went to middle school, where like Mimi went to middle school. We all went to, like, a lot of us went to middle school. And they were moving to close it down. Shuri, Ty. Do we know what happened with, it wasn't, ultimately they didn't decide to close it down, although I feel like that's coming. Do we know what happened there? Were we involved in those discussions? Like, this community is our community. We should be involved in those discussions.
I think Braden and the youth went to a couple meetings over there. If I'm not wrong, somebody went. Or the widening of the road. Okay. Right.
And those, Melissa, you had a second question that I'm not sure I answered, and I don't remember what the question was.
Should we just unconditionally
Oh,
support black folks?
oh, no, no, I don't. Unconditional support, and only Jesus gives that, right? Like, like, I think part of it, and why I like redemption, because to me redemption sounds like I can acknowledge the wrong that you've done, and any moves that you've made to make up for or reconcile. And that doesn't mean that the wrong that you have done is no longer wrong or that it was okay. It's still wrong, right? But if you are still living after your wrong, have I allowed you the chance to be a better person? Have you taken a chance to be a better person? Have I made room for you to be, for your humanity? So no, I don't believe in unconditional support, and I believe in full conversations about people, right? Like flaws and accolades, and this person is great and has done tremendous things, and maybe, did a terrible. Full conversations, because then it shows full humanity. Because not one of us can be like, I lived a perfect life. No one lived a perfect life. Like, let's be real about both what people accomplish and where they failed, and hopefully what they did to make up for that failure, if they did so.
It stems from what you said earlier today, when you said that if you're in a position to, I don't know your exact words, but you were talking about if you're in a position to, for lack of a better term, help, somebody else.
Yeah.
Because it got me thinking about how many times are we in positions where we are able to
Right.
help a black person.
Right.
And do we take that?
Yeah.
There have been times where at work I've been in a situation where I'm like, that little black girl needs some help. So
Yeah.
So I say, okay, off the record, this is,
Right.
or like I'll have a black man come in and I'm like, off the record, you don't need to send this lecture.
Yeah.
Just, and things like that.
Yeah.
Or, looking out for black people. So when you said that earlier, it kind of resonated with me. So I was like, okay, well, maybe that is the right thing.
And some of these things maybe no one told you, right?
Right.
In my workplace, people critique very often, but in not wanting to look prejudiced or racist, or critiques that you might never come to you, right? So in not wanting to look like you are against the black woman, you might never tell the black woman, like, the way you open your emails is not the way to go. Like, everyone might be thinking it and no one might tell you, right? And so I hope that a black person maybe seeing it will be like, hey, I'm not sure if anyone said to you that, like, hey, don't do that. Don't open your emails that way. Sometimes, hopefully, we get to tell each other things that, because of our life, all right? And hopefully we get to help each other. Yeah. Pastor.
I was just wondering, based on your excellent presentation this morning, and how you linked all the external factors that point to where we are now as black people.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, having understood that in your experience, spending all the
general factors that shape us within the black community itself. Things that we could do to help our children avoid, you know, what we pointed out as incarceration. And have you come across things that we could tell our children, and finally, what does education have any part to play with that from your understanding to help us out of that situation?
So I think I don't think there's any like one particular thing I would say that you can do to like help your children avoid, because very often stuff that happens has nothing to do with the child in question or the person in question. It's about like the system, right? So I don't know that you can tell your kid, because you can have the best child who moves in a certain way and dresses in a certain way, and still there was a Harvard professor who had lost his keys and was attempting to get into his own house. And the police, they were called on him, right? Because they're like, who is this black man trying to get into this house, which happened to be his, right? So you can be the most studious and the most held together and still, right, end up with a similar result. But I think historical education is good so that at least children are thinking about if something happens to them, what is happening to them and the context in which it's happening to them, right? And I think empowerment is important. So like, what can I do and what can I give myself so that I have opportunity to live the life that I would like to? And in part that's like, despite what might happen, I can, right? And that I can contribute to movements. I can be a part of advocating for someone. I can start a movement, right? I can participate on the school board. I can advocate for my fellow student who I think is being wrongly targeted. So I would say that education, especially historical education, and empowerment. I hesitate to name any other ways in which we can tell people to move. And I don't know that I've seen that, right? Like I haven't seen the recipe yet for surviving in this. I don't know. Yeah.
But I also think too that we must recognize that law enforcement officers are still in positions of authority and power. One, the guy has a gun. So that's usually my first. I give you an experience that happened to me this week. Sheila and I were rushing to the supermarket, and we have beauty rooms now in Toronto at present, 5 ladies, excited. I'm coming down, and I am trying to get there as quickly. All I saw was the flash, the police flashing on the other side, and he spun around, came at me, and I looked down at my speedometer, and I realized, I said, shit. 60 miles,
That's
in a
it.
40 mile zone.
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Right away, I know I'm wrong. So he comes up to me, and my first thing I went was his apology. I'm so sorry, you know, I didn't realize I was, driving so quickly. And the first thing he said to me was, I'm not going to give you a ticket. He said to see, okay, he went back to Matt and said, you good, be safe on the way. Now, the tendency is to panic and get all, you know, riled up and that kind of stuff. There's still people who are in authority, they have the law on their side. And when we interact with them, we still have to teach our kids how to interact with these law enforcement officers so that not really escalate. When you want to de-escalate, why it is his responsibility to de-escalate, you also want to make sure that you de-escalate the situation as much as possible.
But I want to challenge that some, right?
It's going to legalize.
And you do, right? Like living, we all want to live. But sometimes you may be trying to de-escalate, and sometimes you do everything right. I don't remember his name, but there was one man who, his daughter was in the back of the car, and his girlfriend or someone was in the passenger seat, and they asked him for his license and registration, and he was like, I'm gonna reach for it, and the officer shot him, right? Because he was convinced he was reaching for a gun. And it was all on Facebook Live because his girlfriend was recording the encounter, because at that time, as always, but at that time, people were really being killed by police. And so even, I would say, yes, although disrespecting a police officer, although not smart, is not illegal, right? You shouldn't disrespect police officers, but it's also not a crime, right? Like, They are not actually allowed to arrest you for disrespecting them. They are in power and they do use their badges however they want. So you might well get arrested for disrespecting a police officer, and you shouldn't, right? But you can also do everything right and still end up dead. And so, like, yes, we want to teach our kids to engage in ways that get them home alive and in one piece. But also, they should know that that doesn't save them.
Courtney, you're just so on point. I used to go to West Virginia like 4 times a year, go up there for like 10 days, 10 days. And there's no doubt that's the poorest part of the country. West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, the Appalachian Valley has their own welfare system, okay? And the federal government has another welfare system for them. That's where in October you'll see barefooted, snotty-nosed kids running up and down. They do a lot of meth up there, lots of meth. And the police interact with these people every day, guys who are violent, and you see them, and the police talk them down. They talk them down. It's like, man, I know you're high, and they talk them down. One of the things that we have to be careful of is someone who is an adrenaline junkie, okay, who is just pumped up, I am going to get somebody today. You show any fear, it triggers them to act more dominant. So a lot of police officers, I'm telling you, when I was at Bragg, we used to train some of the SWAT guys. And we used to wonder, what's wrong with these guys? From get-go, the guys are ready to shoot. The first thing is to shoot. And that's the last thing you want to do in a close quarter battle, you know? But that's the first thing they want to do. You show fear. If you listen to Ella Sarah, he was very calm, and he was like, I take ownership. But if he was like, oh, no, sir, yes, no, sir, the guy would have escalated it. The typical police officer would have escalated it, because once they put on that light, adrenaline starts pumping. So you have to be firm, you have to be respectful. Don't think being a cheese-eating person is going to get you out. Once the adrenaline is pumping, that tells them pounce, just pounce on that person.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's not great that we have to move.
Well, there are more white people.
Right.
There are more white people.
But, and I don't know what the percentages are, right? But there should be more white people. Well, no one should be being shot by police. But because of the population.
Right. It's 200 and something million of them.
And truly, you know, arms. I don't know. None of us should be armed, but that's my liberal politics. So, yeah, take the guns away from the police and the people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or when you come here, everything is an election for a judge or whatever like that. And sometimes we feel like we do not have to vote, or it doesn't really matter, or well, this election, or
Yeah.
can you tell us how our voting in those elections, how it influences the legislation and whatever,
Yeah.
the laws that are passed and so on?
So, in many ways, I would say our vote in the presidential election, please vote, is less impactful, especially because we live in a, winner takes all, right? So, like, even if, whoever the majority, whatever party the majority votes for, your electoral college votes will all go to that person, right? So although you should vote in presidential elections, that's actually not your most impactful vote. When we're talking about judges, so judges make sentencing decisions, right? So do you get 1 year? Do you get probation? Do you get 10 years for whatever crime? Judges make those, that's not a jury decision, like judges very often make those decisions. We saw that judge earlier who made that comment about Aunt Jemima. Judges help, right, in part with the choosing a jury. How many strikes do you get? How many times can an attorney say, no, I don't want that person, I don't want that person? The judge gets to challenge an attorney saying, oh, I don't want this person on the jury, right? The judge gets to ask, why? You're like, what, why, right? Judges, super important. If there are judge elections coming up, you should absolutely vote. State legislature, again, if we're talking about especially education, not just school board and that system, but also our textbooks, right? What gets written in our textbooks, how things get taught, how our students get evaluated. That's a state level decision, and that's your state legislature. And so although Texas tends to be Republican, cities in Texas are very Democratic. And so if you exercise your vote within the system, right, you can have a real impact on your state. So yes, there's an election for everything, and there are big elections every 2 years or something on your state legislature. Absolutely vote. Try to do some research. It can be a lot, but very often typing someone's name into Google, you can see big issues, or it takes you to their webpage and you can click like platform, and that will break down the 5 things they stand most strongly on. If you have time and you want to take it far, you can look into their voting history, right? How did they vote on things that matter to you? But absolutely, we should be voting in our smaller elections. Yes.
Is there a specific site that shows all the voting history and stuff like that?
Oh, I don't know.
Local government site?
There, do you know what it is? Yeah, we should find it, and yeah. Because their record definitely is public, right? Like it's known how they vote on everything that has come down. Yeah. Any, mm-hmm. Okay.
Is that something that you think that maybe maybe other states will follow suit? Or I guess with the legalization of marijuana and all that stuff?
So, I mean, I think other states should follow suit. I think in a place like Texas, we might have to wait very long, right? Like the Californias and the New Yorks of the world will do it. And it's good that California is doing expungement because some states are legalizing marijuana while keeping people in prison for marijuana crimes, or having people have a record for marijuana crimes while legalizing it, which is wild. Because so today, for having that amount of marijuana, nothing will happen to you, but your cousin who last year was found with it now has a criminal record for the rest of his life, right? It should be, if we're legalizing it, we're also automatically expunging those records. That's not necessarily happening. And then, yeah, it's a state-by-state decision unless, I don't know, we get a big case in the Supreme Court and they say, blanket legalism. I doubt that's not going to happen. Like, I don't know what would have to happen to have that. It's not going to happen. So it's very much a state-by-state decision, and I think more conservative states are unlikely to do, unless marijuana becomes, so a lot of these things are money decisions, right? So if we hit a recession and marijuana becomes like the money maker, maybe we'll see it legalized across the board. But I doubt it. I think other states will do it. I think Texas is not high on the list to do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Black schools, the culture is pretty much the same, so you're pretty much okay. But when you don't have to deal with where you're in the minority, what are some of the things that you use that you can give to young people in terms of surviving and being in these environments and so on?
So, and I don't even know if I did it well or right, but I think starting at Rice, which is a predominantly white institution, and they call them PWIs. Well, people at HBCUs call them PWIs. That made me find the Black Student Association. So very early at Rice, I found the Black Student Association. Because very early at Rice, I found myself being the only black person in like this meeting or this classroom. I had a class that was 2 people. So it was myself and one other white woman, right? Like it was me and her and our very white professor and her very white dog. And I don't do dogs, and so that was a rough experience. But being in that like space for hours upon hours, after having been in a high school full of all kinds of people, but full of black people, made me go find the Black Student Association. And I think that made a huge difference because one, you're around black people who are chasing similar things, right, as you're chasing, but also it switched for me, this immigrant, like I'm a black immigrant, I'm different kind of mindset, which I think was really important. Like, we're black people. Here, we're all trying to get a higher education. These are the struggles that we face as a result of having melanin, and we're all attempting to be successful. So I would say find your Black Student Union, your Black Student Association, whatever it's called, find it, get involved, go to meetings, know the people. And then the second piece might sound the opposite of that, but find yourself in white spaces. White people, especially white privileged people, have all kinds of information. I'm learning now about, yes, connections. They have all kinds of financial knowledge. Like white 20-something-year-olds, white 19-year-olds know about stock, and they know about Robinhood and how to buy stock. They understand more about 401k because mommy and daddy probably talked about their 401k match at the dinner table, right? Like things that we just have not heard because of the environment that we're in, they have this knowledge. So find your BSA and then find you some white organization, some, not like civil liberties, not like that, but like, if it's the engineering club that happens to be very white, or if it's, I would say a Bible study that's very white, but that might be a strange, I don't know about that worship experience. Something. Find a group of people that have a very vastly different life experience than you do, and be with them and have conversation with them and be in that, because you will learn a ton. So those are the 2 things. Katrina.
When it comes to social justice, what do you feel the church's role should be in the community, or should there be a role that would make it less inclusive if we tackle those issues?
So I always say my Jesus was a radical. I don't know about anybody else's Jesus. My Jesus was a radical. Jesus sat with everyone we consider questionable, right? And Jesus was on the cross next to a thief who's gonna be in heaven. Jesus was a radical. And I think Christians are called to love radically. Sometimes we act like our faith is this fragile thing in a fragile box that will break if it touches the world. But how are we touching people if we're so afraid of our faith breaking, right? How are we reaching people when we just cannot relate? I think the church should be radical. I think the church should love radically. I think the church should be involved in the community in radical ways. I think that's the only way we win souls. Otherwise, we just keep getting more and more Adventists. What? Okay. No. We reach the world by reaching the world. Mm-hmm.
But now he has apologized, and black people is saying that he's truly sorry about doing this. But one of the things that hit me the most about that was when he used the thing, his pet name for it was throw them against the wall. Okay? Do you think that
Right? Yeah. I think we need to see, like, with someone like Bloomberg, right, who has political power, who has had political power, where's the fruit of that? So you have apologized, and the policy, he didn't walk the policy back, right? The courts were like, no, 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 that's not going to fly. After years of it affecting people, right, the court said no more stop and frisk. What has he done, right? Like, have we then seen new legislation? Have we seen him advocating for new things that make up for that system, right? Have we seen him, what has he spoken on? I'm not even necessarily affirmative action, right? But what difference on the, what is the fruit of this apology? Is this an apology of words that you then, a person of power, have not done anything with that power to uphold that apology? Is this a political apology? Like, now I am running for things and I apologize. What is the fruit of your change, right? Because change produces fruit, right? Like, people's character produces fruit. Where is the fruit of that? And I mean, yeah. I think we should look for fruit. Yeah.
Question, Courtney. So Nathan, Vincent, Riley, Brielle, they want to go to law school one day. What do you tell them?
Go to law school. I think, so for me, I found law school to be a very empowering experience. I don't think law school is easy, and it's definitely not cheap, right? So I don't say enter it lightly, but especially for Black people who feel like this is something they want to do, 100% of the time I say pursue it, right? Because knowing, like, you now have this whole base of knowledge that many people don't have.
But
And
I'm starting now from the
From-
middle
from-
school, elementary school. How do you prepare yourself?
wow. So, of course, academics. Middle school, you want to learn, right? So, like, you want your kids to, because there are some middle schools, because of the way our education system works, where your kids leave 8th grade behind where they should be. And that then affects high school performance, which then affects college, just even what college they can go to, and then how they perform in college, right? So I don't think it's so much so that the grades in middle school, unless you are looking at a situation where you go to high school affects, or like what you do in middle school is affected, where you go to high school is affected by what you've done in middle school. So in Fort Bend, maybe, right? Because we went to McAuliffe and had to apply to Hightowers Medical Science Academy to be able to go there. So in some ways, the way that we performed in middle school mattered. High school grades, sure. To the extent that it affects where you can go to college, absolutely. And I will say that for people coming from a lower socioeconomic background, private is financial aid. So very often we don't look at private schools because they're very expensive, right? And that really depends on your parents' financial situation, but many schools offer, like, I think Rice now does it at, is it 80,000? If your parents make less than 80,000, you go to Rice completely for free, right? And if they make 90,000, you get a certain amount. And I think it's up to 160. I don't have the numbers so clear, but like, you get some aid. Full tuition if they make under what? 8. Yeah. Right, room, board, everything. You get something. Yeah. And I mean, Rice costs about like between 56 and 64,000 a year or something like that. Very expensive. But then that is paid for 4 years if your parents make below a certain amount. So I would say look at private institutions because their financial aid is excellent, right? But also you can go to a public institution And there is also FAFSA, right, federal aid. There are scholarships. I can't really speak to scholarships. I've applied for one scholarship in my whole entire life, and I don't know what the result was. So that one is not really in my wheelhouse of things that I know, but absolutely there are scholarships. I found it extremely tedious to look through and find one and then apply, but they exist. There's lots of money out there to be given. But in-state institutions also, you get in-state tuition, which is cheaper, right? If you live at home, it's cheaper, right? And then federal aid, there are grants. I will say you want grants. You want federal aid before you get loans, and you want like public loans before you get private loans, right? Private loans should be the last. You might have to resort to private loans, but that should be the last place that you go for like educational debt. So yes, go to college, and if you're thinking of law school, truly your college GPA matters big time. So it doesn't matter what you major in, so you should major in something that you're interested in, but you need to keep your GPA reasonable, or good, and for every point that your GPA is low, you're going to have to make up for that with your LSAT score. So if your GPA is, I don't know, is like, let's say a 3.5, you need to score higher on the LSAT than if it were a 4.0. Now, what would be perfect is a 4.0 and a 180 on the LSAT. Then you can go wherever you want, but you kind of need to do that mathematics. Like, I need to make up for any dip in my GPA with a higher LSAT score. And so I took the LSAT twice, and the first time, I was like, no, I can perform better. And I wanted my choice of law school, right? Like, I wanted my choice of law school. I wanted to see them and be like, this is where I want to go, and I have the opportunity to go there because I got in. And so I took it again. And I will say that you can't really fail the LSAT, but we should make room for improvement, right? Like, so you took it once and you didn't do great, go at it again. It's not the end of the world. Give it another try. And my second score was significantly higher, and I got into every school that I wanted to, right? And so it's doable. Your GPA really, really, really matters. Really matters. It really matters. And your LSAT score really matters. Marcus. How do you find a lawyer? It depends on what kind of lawyer you're looking for. So, and that's the thing too, we don't specialize in law school. So, yeah. But true, if you know a lawyer, any lawyer, one way to find another lawyer is through any lawyer that you know. Right.
Okay, right now, I have no legal situation. So in my head, I'm not thinking I need to
Right.
go get a lawyer.
And you don't, yeah.
Should I get pulled over and we have a bad situation?
You need a lawyer.
I'm sitting in there with other people that don't have lawyers, sitting in public defenders. Do I need a lawyer now? Do I go to LegalZoom? Do I go to
No. So, I mean, so the public defenders, especially for if you can't afford legal representation, and it's a criminal situation, right? So absolutely, if you cannot afford a lawyer and you've been arrested, take your public defender, 100%. You can take your public defender and then spend some time finding a lawyer, but like from the start of that station, because lawyers will tell you what to do, and they'll tell you what you can and cannot say, and they'll tell you what is allowed, right? Just information that just being lay people, we don't know. I don't even, right? So yes, at the start of that, if you're not connected to a lawyer at all, take your public defender. And then, if you can afford a lawyer, you want to look at organizations. So there are various organizations. I'm like thinking New York, but like, so say in New York, there's like Bronx Defenders. So something like that in Houston will probably be like Public Defender Services, or HISD Defenders. Like, you want to start or have someone Googling for you these public interest organizations that defend. And that's the same for if you have someone with immigration problems that needs an immigration lawyer. You want to reach out to like, let's say ACLU of Houston or ACLU of Texas. And if they cannot take on your work, they can very much point you to someone who can take on your work, because lawyers are connected to other lawyers. Melissa?
That made me think about something you said. You need a lawyer to ask a lawyer that you know. I have a friend that's an attorney, and she really, really strongly dislikes when people ask her legal advice. For what you just said, like when you said that you may not know what to say in that situation because you are
Right.
a certain type of attorney while you went to school and studied on, a broad range of things. The small details, that's why they have different attorneys that
Yeah.
do different things. How do you, all of it to ask
Bless you.
anything, so how do you react when people ask you legal questions, and does it ever get overwhelming? Like, do you see an abundance of people saying, hey, Courtney, what should I do here? What should I do here? How does that?
So I'm very big on I don't know, because a lot of stuff, like, I don't know. So that's one. And then mostly we don't give legal advice, right? Like, I don't even know if I'm allowed to. I don't give legal advice, right? Because if you're not my client and I'm giving legal advice, like, that's my license on the line. So I'm not out here giving legal advice. But for the most part, culturally, I know we think that lawyers, oh, you're a lawyer, you know you know things about all the things. So I kind of understand where people are coming from when they're like, oh, can we, da-da-da. And if I don't know, I don't know. Or I'll tell you, I looked it up, or pull this thing up on Google. I was just reading that. Very much, I will send you to read it just like I had to read it, and we will make conclusions about it together or something. Because, like, I don't practice criminal law. I'm a corporate lawyer, and I don't litigate, right? So I don't even do courtroom advocacy. I do, like, bank deals, right? So that's very far and removed from this, can an officer search my car, right? I may know things about that, but, like, no, that's not my field of practice, and especially because in law school, we don't specialize. It's just a broad generalist education. A lot of things we don't know. Pastor?
Perhaps there are other questions before from what
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
question about these children.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong because I always advise children, black kids, that if they want to be successful lawyer, science, whatever it is, it's important for them to love reading. To love it, to read.
Yeah.
Is half their problem solved.
That's right. So you may not love it, but know that it's not. If you want to be a lawyer and you hate reading, just know it's in your life forever, right? Like, my eye doctor will tell me, you would be a great candidate for laser eye surgery when you stop reading. It's not happening, right? Like I said, I don't even do courtroom advocacy, and I spend my days reading. So you can hate it. Just be ready to do something that you don't love, as in, like, an aspect of a thing. Don't do something you don't love with your life, but, like, be ready to read a lot. Yeah.
Okay, as a church, being, I guess, for students, there may be a lot of things that we take for granted that we probably think never going to happen in the future. Can you give us a few pointers and maybe some of the things that probably we should look for, or maybe things that we should probably pay attention to that could become a legal issue?
Wow. I don't know. I think immigration is a big one, right? But so if you're a resident card rather than citizenship, that's something to look out for, right? Like, citizenship is a stronger bar for sure. You're a U.S. citizen, Residency, that can go any which way. About deportation, very much you can be sent out of the country as a permanent resident, right? And so thinking about immigration, and any kind of violation of the law can affect your immigration status, right? So that's so maybe not us in the room, but people that we love and people that we know, that's a real risk. And then I'm trying to think of what other like systems we may come across and face and we need to look out for. I don't know. Child protection, because we beat our kids. maybe, we do handle discipline probably in different ways than Americans do. And maybe your neighbor hears that scream, and maybe that's something to look out for.
That happens. I know somebody who was living in her daughter, she spanked her daughter, and her daughter went to school and said beat me. She didn't.
Because we use the word beat.
We used the word beat.
Yeah.
And the CPS office came to the office, and the CPS person came to her door, and they had to do interviews. They went to the school and took pictures of the child, to, all that. Like,
Yeah.
there's a case open because the little girl went and said her mother beat her.
And we say beat. Even today when I talk about growing up, I'm like beat. I use the word beat, and I really was not a child because I was just rude instead of bad, right? And so that's not a beating situation. It's just like right? But we say beat, and that's real. Americans respond very strongly to the word beat. Yeah. And so that's true. Like CPS, and that's tough. And even this pinch thing we do, right? We tend to pinch our kids in public, and someone might see you pinching and wringing your child's arm, and that could very much turn into a thing, right? Because people respond strongly to those kinds of physical acts that to us are just like normal. Again, Yeah. Here? Oh, I mean, with the dreads, and he moved schools, and and the Supreme Court has said, right? Is he? And I'm so glad he kept his dreads, right? Like, and there are cases now that are saying that maybe sort of the law that we have right now is that it might be like an employer might have the right to ask you to cut your dreads. I don't know how long that will stand. Like, I don't know if when that gets, and I'm not sure where it's located in the court system now, actually. I don't know if that will stand, but like dreads are turning out to be an issue. I don't think that means cut dreads. I think it means change minds, and even change our minds as West Indians about how we think about dreads. Yeah. Exactly. You cannot discriminate based on hair. Right. Trying to do that. Yeah. Is liberal. Yeah. But I think it means like showing up in our professional spaces, looking the way we look, right? I very much show up to work. I don't have dreads, but I very much show up to work in my puff and like black as can be, because this is who I am. And yes, this is a very, very white space, and people love to remember you by your hair, right? So very often white people have trouble, I guess, telling our faces apart, so they remember you by your hair. So when you change your hair, they call you by like the next black woman's name. It happens frequently. But me changing like we change our hair, and two, it forces you to get familiar with me and my face, like me as a person, right? And shows you how this is how we are going to deal. This is how Courtney's going to show up to work, and you will have to, and I think the more we do that, the more we make space for other black people coming behind us to show up to these spaces as themselves, even with their dreads. Yeah.
I know one case, on my job, there was a reference on how women should dress.
Mm-hmm.
Because this one Jamaican woman, she decided she's going to go natural. So, back and forth, so how she should comb her hair back and be nice and that kind of stuff. And she fought it. And I was with her on the issue. And she wants, eventually she came to, I used to look at her, she looked like a lion, but anyway. Always here, always here. And I said to her, you know what? That's your natural hair.
Exactly.
You could go and comb your hair and straighten it. No offense to
People who do that, right? Yeah.
but that's your natural
Right.
color.
Everyone else gets to show up with that.
Proud of it.
Yeah. No. Everyone else gets to show up with their hair as it grows out of their heads. Hopefully they brush it, right? Or like, and even a ponytail, right? Like a white ponytail is a ponytail. A black ponytail is a puff, right? Like our hair in a ponytail is a puff. Like everyone else gets to show up with their texture as their texture. We should get to show up with our texture as our texture. And we should change the way we think about what is kempt, right, and unkempt, and how we think about neat. Because colonialization and also has informed the way we think about how hair falls and how hair should fall. Some people's hair falls down with gravity. Most of our hair grows up, right? So when you're talking about what is kempt, maybe there's a different standard for different hair and different people.
But Courtney, shouldn't the space be broad enough for, so the black woman who doesn't want to go natural
Right.
shouldn't have to feel
Absolutely
any
not.
kind of way.
Yeah.
And the one who goes natural shouldn't have to feel any way. I'm talking in a post-60s kind of
Yeah.
connotation where right now we should be able to do whatever we want to do with our hair.
Right.
Or
It shouldn't
whatever.
matter. Yeah.
There shouldn't even be a conversation.
Right. And yes, look professional. I even hesitate to say that because our own definition of professional is absolutely warped, right? In all kinds of Eurocentric blah, blah, blah. People should get else.
You got CEOs coming in with jeans that
Right.
they bought
And they're
20 years
flip-flops.
ago and-
They're absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until you're CEO, don't go to work in your flip-flops, but, yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah. Braids. Yeah. Yep. Threads. Yeah. And it didn't hurt. Like, he is a physician. The head with the hair works just fine. Yeah. Right. With-
Isn't it the case, though, that the problem, complaints about women and black women and their hair, it's not so much from white people, it's probably from ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's absolute truth to that. Many times white people will be like, wow, da da da, and black people will be like, girl, you did not brush your hair today. So, yeah. I think there's absolute truth to that. Yeah. Any more questions? I think I've said all I could say. Yeah, if you're interested in law school, go to and if you have questions about law school, text me. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So here we go.
That's why we got to
Start prepping them from, yeah. And I think read. I know people don't like reading, but read. You should love reading, but if you don't, still read. Yeah. Because reading comprehension is the key. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Courtney, I must say this closing. Some people look at certain things as difficult, and I guess it's difficult because they don't want to challenge it. And if they find themselves challenging, eventually they might end up liking it. And that's the end goal, that you like what you do. If you don't like what you do, you're not gonna.
You're going to do it well. Yeah.
So, and nothing is difficult. It's what you put your mind to do. What you put your mind to do. No, tell me what you do.
Use your gifts. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's thank Courtney for her presentation today. You know, I like when she said, I say I don't know a lot. The people who always say I don't know are some of the smartest people I know. The more you read, the more you know how much you don't know. If you don't like to read, remember this. I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to always tell us, you can play now, work later, or work now and play later. Regardless of what, you're going to have to work. So, something that's foreign to you all. I carried water in the night because we played during the day. So what do? Now that you're in school, work hard. Nobody was born smart. This genius stuff is nonsense. It is nonsense. Maybe in a generation you may have one or two geniuses, Einstein here, Mozart here, or this. The rest of the people just sit at that table and burn the midnight oil, and people call them smart. They just read themselves into being good. So, young folks, people tell you, oh, you can't get this subject. Okay. If they spend an hour and they can get it, you spend 2 hours. If you got to spend 3 hours, if you have to get a tutor. Courtney told us, you hang with the smartest person, right? You look out for the people who are going somewhere, and they're going to push you in that direction. I mean, I'm so impressed and so happy for Courtney's presentation to us today. This is something that, Courtney, we're going to call on you again, because we got to get more of this. We got to get more of this over and over again, because one meal is not good enough, you know. So, you know, on behalf of the church, the pastor, want to thank you. Pastor is going to do a Vespers, and we're going to get out of here. All right, thanks, Courtney.
And you know, one of the things of having, you know, Courtney and any of the other excellent students and professionals that we have coming back to the church and speaking is that they inspire the next generation, give hope to our children to aspire. So thank you so much. It was the first time I, you know, to hear Courtney speak, and thank you. I'm impressed, and God bless you. Do you know how far you have to travel if you're going east in order to go west? I'm sure you've thought about that, right? So when you go north to south, you know, you're eventually going to reach south or reach north. But when you travel east, it's gonna, you know, you'll always be going towards west, right? And you listen to how, and I don't know if you'll take encouragement from this, but I certainly do. Crazy stuff mistakes that you've made, and you've wondered whether God forgives you, and the enemy comes and says, hey, you know, you've done, this is terrible, God would never forgive you, and this kind of stuff. Listen to this. For as the heaven is high above the earth, so great is his mercy toward them that love him. As far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgression. What's impressed me here is the psalmist deliberately, when he's talking about God's forgiveness, mercy, and his grace, he deliberately did not say as far as the north is from the south. Because if he did, it means that there's going to come a time when God will not forgive us. But he says as far as the east is from the west, that's how far he has removed our transgression. Which means there's never a time and there's never a moment when God is not willing to forgive and to forget our transgressions against him. We don't have to be tricked by what the enemy say, which come naturally for us to believe it. It's natural for us because of our sinful nature to believe that we reach a stage or we've reached a depth where God no longer can forgive, or what he has forgiven, he's come back round to bring it up again and use it against us and say, you remember what you did last time? I'm not going to forgive you now. That's the great news and encouragement that I receive from the text, which says, God removes our transgression as far as the east is from the west. Let's leave tonight. Thank you so much, Courtney, for bringing us the information that we needed. But let us leave tonight remembering God. And what I love about Courtney, I was saying at the table today, but what I like was her concept of redemption. Because that tells me, the other bit tells me about her learning, but that tells me about her character. That she's a kind of lawyer that's there not to condemn, but to recognize failures, but to give a second chance. God is like that. You leave here today knowing that there is redemption. And the redemption is not based on God forgiving us once. And then if we make the same mistake, he bring it up again. But it is as the east is from the west. Let us stand together. Would love to sing a Vespers song. I haven't done Vespers for so long, I forget what the... I think that's for Friday. That's a school song, right? Now the day is over. Sorry, yes. Now the day is over, night is drawing nigh. Shadows of the evening steal across the sky. Father gives the weary calm and sweet repose. With thy tenderest blessing, may your eyelids close. Through the long night watches, may thine angels spread their white wings about me, watching round my bed. When the morning waketh, then may I arise, pure and fresh and sinless in thy holy eyes. Father in heaven, thank you for a wonderful day together today, and thank you for a wonderful Sabbath. Take us home safely now. Bring us back again on Wednesday. Bring us back again on Sabbath. Please take Courtney safely back to New York. And just because of what she did for us today, when she go back to New York, may she be surprised by the love and kindness and praise and promotion and financial increase and everything that she will receive. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Thank you.